My name is Sara Smith. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a professor of history at American River College, and today's date is August 29th, 2023. So let's start off by establishing the basics. What's your full name? What are your pronouns? And what's your date of birth?
My name is Maria Jose Quintana Rivera, but I go by Maria or MJ. My pronouns are she, they, and I was born January 6, 2002.
So that's 21? You're 21?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Was I supposed to say my age?
No.
Okay.
So tell me a little about yourself. What are your interests and hobbies, and what do you like to do?
Well, I'm a psychology major. My hobbies include writing, songwriting, singing, um, drawing, and trying to get back into reading. Um, Besides that, like activities that don't involve being inside, I also like going out with friends, like going on hikes, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
So where did you grow up, and where do you live now?
I kind of grew up all over the place because when I was younger, well, I can always edit this because I don't. Okay, I kind of grew up all over the place. So I was born in Peru, but when I was a year old, we moved to Canada. Then I was there for like 4 or 5 years, and then we moved to Mexico. Then I was there for 2 years, and then I moved here, and I've been in Sac since I was 8 years old. But I've been like raised in Sac for what is that? More than half of my life, I think. Yeah.
And so you live in Sacramento now.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you attend college, and what do you study?
I attend ARC and Sac City College, and I'm a psychology major. Or well, wait, can I like go on like
Yeah.
ramble? I can ramble. Okay.
Yeah.
So I can like say like all of my college like.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I went to Davis my first year, and I was a biology major. At first, I wanted to become a physician assistant, but then I realized that I wanted to pursue a career that just allowed me to interact with people from all different kinds of backgrounds in a more connecting way. So, yeah, I chose psychology, and I decided to come here before I could finally like figure it out that was what I wanted to do. So, yeah.
How long were you at UC Davis before you decided to go to community college?
I was there for a year, but this was also during the pandemic. That was like my freshman year, and I burned out really quickly because I was also like studying a major that I did not want at a school that I also did not really want to be studying at, and I was already like battling with like depression, so it just kept on getting worse. And then I was like already very indecisive. I knew that I wanted to study psychology, but my parents were very adamant about me studying biology and becoming a healthcare professional because that's the career that they chose. So they just really pushed me for that. But then at one point, I just realized like I just lost interest in what I was studying, and then yeah, it ended up in me getting expelled from UC Davis, and then I was just forced to come here and then figure things out, like what I wanted to actually study and if I really wanted to take the risk of studying psychology.
And why did you get expelled?
It was more of like because I was starting to fail my classes. Yeah, I was starting to fail my classes, and I think I definitely could have prevented that if I had actually been honest about what I was going through and about like my like being unsure if that's what I wanted to study. But right.
And your classes were all online at that point?
they were all of mine. And yeah, it wasn't really, I wasn't just, I was very isolated. Um, I also like started to realize, oh, I no longer have to like keep up like this image that I had been putting up for so long in high school, which was like dressing hyper feminine and being like straight or, you know, putting up that image. And I just felt more alone when I realized that I didn't really have friends who truly like saw me for who I actually was. So then add that to the depression and everything. Yeah, just a very lonely experience.
So how long have you been at ARC and SEC?
Since 2021. Since the fall of 2021. So what is that? 2.5 years? 3 years? I think 2.5 years. Yeah.
Have you been full-time or part-time?
Full time.
And I guess why did you decide that, I know you said a little bit about it, but why did you decide to major in psychology?
I first started as like an interest in high school because I couldn't really understand myself and what I was feeling, and I really wanted to like put a word to things. And then I started to read about it, and then I realized learning more about myself can also help me like form like deeper connections. And if I can like do that for myself, what could I do for other people as well in that sense? Like that's why I really wanted to pursue something with young adults or adolescents because that's like a really like important time where you help them figure out their identity. And I guess I wish I had had that help when I was an adolescent. So yeah, I just want to do that for others and hopefully inspire them. And I think psychology is just the route that really like speaks to my strengths. So,
So can you tell me how you identify with regard to your social identities broadly speaking? So race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, disabilities, religion, and so on?
sorry, it's such a loaded question. Yeah. I identify as a lesbian, Latina, multiracial, and yeah, in terms of gender, currently questioning. So that's more of like a complicated answer for me. I, yeah, I mean I can go into that, but yeah,
So multiracial, can you elaborate?
yeah. So for instance, like in my family, we have Afro-Peruvian, Afro-Peruvian, Peruvian Chinese, and also like Quechua Indigenous. And yeah, sadly, like that history has been like lost, but we still recognize that we have like my great grandparents and grandparents that they come from like different backgrounds. But I think also in my culture, although it's like a Latin American culture, which is like Latin American countries are known for being composed of different like races, it's still not very proud of being like multiracial. You clearly like I feel like it's deeply rooted that Latin American countries like to flaunt more their like European heritage. So I feel like if anything in my family, that's you can clearly tell like which side that they like to talk about more.
So anything else you want to say about being multiracial?
Mm. Oh, oh, I definitely have. It's been so like it's such an interesting experience because I also feel like here, like because of my different like characteristics, sometimes people try to like use it as a guessing game, and it can be kind of uncomfortable because they're like betting on like, oh, what are you? Oh, you're this, you're this, you're this, and it's like I'm not sure what you want, how you want me to react, or also like, why don't you just ask? You know, instead of just assuming, because I feel like they're just assuming, or like they're trying to like pin like what I am, because then that's going to affect how they're going to treat me and how they're going to like interact with me. Because I guess people can't sometimes they can't just help, you know, but like they can't. I don't know. I guess like with new people with new experiences, new interactions, if it's like uncharted like territory, you want to make it like something that's familiar or like comprehensible, so that you know like how like I don't know what your like previous experiences and previous interactions can like apply to this person or to like this new like topic, new event, whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of like unconscious bias. Like you want to label people so that you know how to treat them, but you're not totally conscious of the fact that you're doing that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's like I don't know. I feel like I can personally interact with people without having to know like how they um, identify like racially or like you know what their racial background is or like what their ethnicity is. I think that at the end of the day, we're all people and we all have like our own set of experiences. Not to like neglect that our experiences are shaped by you know our different cultures and our different backgrounds. But I think people tend to put you in a box depending on like what you say your like culture or like your race ethnicity is, you know. And I just feel like I like to not do that because I like to like give people a chance to tell me who they are. And I guess I always wanted that. But it's something being multiracial is also something that I actually like had some like negative like interactions with other Latin American Latino people, but which is actually like pretty interesting how like even like deep within the like that community there is also like, some prejudice. Um, but yeah,
Does your family also identify as multiracial?
my family, yeah, they do. I mean, my parents they themselves talk about it, but I think that when they do, there's like a sense of like shame because you know because of our skin color and also like our like physical attributes, it's just like looked down upon in like our country. So you know, to like in private to me they tell me like, oh, remember like you have family from like here and like you know we come from here and this is like your great grandfather like immigrated from China and he came to Peru and stuff like that. But like to the public, it's more like they flaunt like, oh, we have like a great grandparent from Spain or something, you know, just to like justify that they're worthy of like good treatment. When personally, I don't feel that way because I feel like I don't know. I think it's beautiful, and I wish that if people hadn't been ashamed of that in our family, then maybe we would know more about our history. And it's kind of a shame that that is lost because I wish I knew more about it. I mean, all I can do is like educate myself, but I wish that I had also learned that from when I was younger from my parents because I feel like that would have helped me like instill a sense of pride instead of learning how to become like how to be proud of who I am and what I look like. You
There's a pressure to sort of assimilate into dominant norms, both like sort of that's rooted in your family's history being Peruvian, but also in kind of the norms of American society, would you say?
could you rephrase that?
We could just move on. I'm just thinking about sort of like trying to assimilate into American culture. That's what a lot of people end up sort of talking about their experience, sort of like, you know, ignoring the sides of their identity that are indigenous, you know, for instance, or like not learning Spanish in favor of speaking only English, right? In an effort to assimilate. So it's sort of like what you're talking about right now sort of reminds me of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always like had that. It's really interesting because like I always felt conflicted because it was like when I was in Peru or two other um like Latin Americans, it was like I wasn't like Latina enough. But then here, I don't know. It's like you're either not like Latina enough or you're not like American enough, like Peruvian enough or American enough. But it's like I don't know. It's really interesting. Yeah, it did cause me like some like inner conflicts because I was like, how am I supposed to act? You know, when I'm just being like, I'm just trying to get used to. I mean, especially like growing up because that wasn't even something that I was trying to like really focus on. I was just trying to get a handle on like how to make friends and feel like this was home when I had just like moved here. But then, yeah. Hold on, let me just try to like. Yeah, I always had those two sides that were like, you know, you're American, like you're from America, like you. I don't know, just shaming me for like my culture too. But then my own culture shaming me for like adopting like these American like ideals, like the individualistic ideals, and it's like one of the like Peruvian values is that of family. Um, but then yeah, when I came here, it was really interesting because it was like conflicting values and just like cultures like clashing. It was like my parents like at home they were trying to tell me like prioritize this, prioritize family, prioritize like working hard, but then it was like outside it was more about prioritizing like being an individual and creating something and then yeah, yeah, it was very interesting. And then also trying to explain like what my experience has been. I felt like no matter what, like nothing was really tangible because it was either like people trying to tell me like how to act or how to identify and then shaming me for like what I chose no matter what. So that was like so then at that point I don't know. Maybe could you ask a follow-up question?
Well, actually, do you want to say anything more about your social identities? You about disabilities, religion?
Oh yeah. Yeah, my parents were actually like my family is Catholic. They raised me Catholic. Um, but I don't associate myself with any religion. And also no, and I am neurodivergent. Sorry, I was looking at the camera there. I did not mean to look at the camera. I'm
It's
also
okay, look wherever you want.
I no, but that is like deep like eye contact. But I'm neurodivergent, so I have ADHD and borderline personality disorder. Um, but yeah, yeah, those two, and then question.
So you mentioned being a lesbian. What does it mean to you to be a lesbian with regard to your sexual orientation? How would you define that for yourself?
I would say as someone who is sexually and romantically like drawn to women and women and non-binary people, but yeah, not not people who identify as men. Yeah.
So, and you said you use she/they pronouns, and you're questioning gender right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you want to say about that? You want to elaborate? How did you come to the point at which you decided to use she/them pronouns, or she/they pronouns?
It's so confusing. Like, I just know that like she because I just know that no matter where I go, I'm always going to be perceived as a woman. And even though I don't feel quite there, like I feel like I'm like between like non-binary and women. I feel like I'm like kind of in the middle of it, and then yeah, but it's just always been so hard to explain to people. And honestly, sometimes I just feel like it's a lot easier if I just tell people, oh, it's she or her, because otherwise they're like they, like, what do you mean? It's because although I was like raised as a woman, sometimes I just don't want to be perceived as that. I just want to be perceived as like person and separate from like gender and yeah. So that's why I'm like questioning because I know that also like there are like certain stereotypes that people have for like oh for women and like non-binary people and I'm like am I supposed to fulfill this stereotype in order to be seen like worthy of like my pronouns and like I don't know and being able to like say that that's what my identity is because then you have people who are like but why not just this and it's already so hard when you're like questioning because you're trying to get a grasp on the answer for yourself but then you have people who are like waiting for an answer and you don't want to like make it seem like you're unsure because then it's like see you're unsure it's because you're this you know because then they try to like convince you that you're something that you know that you're not so,
Have you had that experience of people trying to tell you what, like, really kind of challenging you and trying to tell you what they think you are?
yeah not even just for like my my pronouns or like my gender expression but also like with my sexuality it's like it's always it's not always but most of the time it's like when I tell people they take it as a challenge and it's like especially when they can't comprehend how they're like well why not just this like you know but that doesn't make sense like how can you be this like you know and it's I will yeah at some point it gets tiring like having to explain too like for instance my sexuality like I've always known what my sexual preference was since I was like 4 but you know it's always been no matter what age I was it was like the person who I would tell would whoever it was would always be like, but are you sure? Because, you're only 12, or you're only 16, or you're 20, you're 21. Like, it's either you're too young to know, or like it's just a phase, or um, also like, oh, but no, because your past experiences have been this. When it's like, all this time I'm trying to tell you like who I am, and I resorted to like trying to like fit in just because you wouldn't believe me when I told you like who I was. Yeah.
Do you think that people have this idea, like a stereotype of what a lesbian should look like, and that's part of it?
Yeah. I remember I had a friend recently say like, but you don't look gay. And I was like, and it's so like frustrating because it's like like I get it because also in high school when I was deep in the closet, I tried so hard to like throw off um, any suspicions about like my sexuality. So I would like try to like dress differently and just like yeah, just completely like pay attention to what the stereotype was as a lesbian and be like, okay, so I have to do the opposite so that no one can suspect. But in reality, like you can still be like who you want to be, like who and be attracted to whoever, and your style has nothing to do with it. Your appearance has nothing to do with it. But it's like back then I had a completely different idea, and I just felt like, yeah, I yeah. So then when I finally like embraced my sexuality, it was like people still didn't believe me, even when I was like openly trying to like say like who I was and like correct people if they like said like, oh no, you're bisexual. I'm like, oh, like I'm lesbian, I'm gay. But yeah, and then even within the community too, it's like it's a struggle because I feel like I tried so hard to look like this one image, and now I'm trying to like look like this other image so that people can like so I can feel validated, not just like but now it's like not even towards like straight people. Now it's like within the community itself.
So can you talk some about your coming out experience? What was the process like of figuring out your identity?
I feel like the process in figuring out my identity was like very all over the place. Because like I said, I knew it when I was like 4 that I had an attraction for women, but then I didn't like fully accept that until I was like 13, 13, 14. No, not even. I feel like at first I was like, okay, it's there. Maybe if I just push it down, and I'm sure that other people go through that too. Maybe they're like, I'm sure it's like, no, I take it back. Actually, I felt that I was like the only one who felt that way. I was like, oh my god, I haven't heard of this before. I actually, because I remember in 3rd grade, like wondering, like, oh, what if I like boys and girls? And then I was like, oh, what would be like the word for that? Like, I was like, huh. And I thought I had discovered it. I hadn't heard of it before. Um, but yeah, no, it was very like, it was so like obvious to me. Like it was so like undeniable that I would like have like a feeling for like a girl or like for one of my friends. But then I would try so hard to like run away from like that attraction or like those feelings by kind of distancing myself from that person, pushing myself to pursue something with a boy or with a guy. I'm talking about childhood, so with a boy. Um, but yeah, and also I was very like I said, my parents were very religious. Um, they're always like they always like verbally told me how they didn't really agree with that lifestyle. So it was just kind of clear to me when I was younger that I was probably not going to be accepted or something bad was just going to happen if I if I was gay, you know. Um, but so I didn't even want to tell anyone when I was younger because I just wanted to like figure it out on my own. Because like I said, I didn't know that it was something that happened or that it could actually that other people were going through experiences like that. So I thought, okay, I can fix this um, on my own, and I tried to like find solutions to not feel the way that I was feeling, to not to not want to try to convince myself that I didn't want to be who I actually was. Um, so yeah, and then whenever my mom would suspect that I was getting too close to someone, I would bring up a guy from my class, be like, "Oh, I like this one guy, I like this one boy." Like, you know, if like maybe I hugged a friend for too long and I caught my mom like looking at us, I was like, "Oh, anyways, then I tell my friend like, "Oh, remember that cute boy from our class?" Yeah. Um, and then that kind of also started to carry on in middle school and high school. um, yeah, like I remember just feeling like a lot of shame for it in middle school, and I feel like that's when I stopped like affiliating myself with a religion, because a lot of that was also like religious shame. Because I did go to a Catholic middle school, where it was like a Catholic K through 8 here in Sac, and I just yeah, I just remember thinking, I just remember feeling like so much shame, being like so selfish, um, for liking women, because I was like maybe because when I was younger, when my parents were raising me as Catholic, they instilled in me like those like Catholic teachings, and one of those was also like, oh, it's a sin. Of course, at one point I was like, how can it be a sin to love someone, and how can it be a sin to like to be who I wanted to be? But then I was like, am I being selfish? And it just really like conflicted me, and then oh, and it just kind of, and then also like just the whole perspective of like people and friends who also identified as religion, what they would say about like queer people was just another thing that it added to that shame for me. Um, yeah, and then in high school, it was it was also, I thought that I would actually like have the opportunity to maybe explore more of who I was in high school, but I went to like a Catholic all girls school. And the fact that it was all girls made it like a lot harder. But um yeah. Oh my gosh. I just remember like I knew like that I that's when I like finally admitted it to myself. Okay, this is not something that I can fix. Like it's there. And it's not going anywhere. So yeah. But but figuring out my identity, I still like wasn't fully ready to like tell people because I was scared of how they would react. And I think I still have like that fear sometimes when someone asks me like how I identify. I feel like I still like hold back a little because I'm like holding my breath and seeing like what's their reaction going to be. Like, do I have to? Am I gonna? It's just like bracing myself for impact. But it's but yeah, in high school, those were definitely scary times because it was like I did have crushes sometimes on friends, and I remember having to fight like so hard to like not make it obvious and like try to hide from I don't know any suspicions because yeah, I mean, and then one of my friends who was like publicly open at the time, like she had a girlfriend, but they would get like stares from other classmates, and then people would be like, "There's no need for her to flaunt, like, or to like show her queerness, or like, you know." But it's like they're just holding hands, and then it was just so. And then it wasn't even just that; it was also like the words that people would use, and also I remember like I had one group of friends who like when they found out that like someone was gay, they were like, "What? Like, but she doesn't look gay. Oh my gosh." They were like, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Like, we'll never know like who is actually gay. Like, oh my god, they could be around." And I was like, I was like, crazy, right? Yeah. But yeah, no. Um, but also just like my friends, they were so boy crazy, and I knew like what it was, but I knew that I kind of felt like it wasn't safe for me to like tell people who it was yet. So I would just like again talk about boys to hopefully like try to distract them from like any suspicions. And yeah, I it wasn't until I told one friend, and then she was because she's also queer, and then she was like, "Really? But you always talked about boys." And I was like, "Didn't really." I was like, I was like, okay, you want me to prove it to you? Fine. And then I gave her like a list of like people who who I liked, and she's like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, why do you think I stopped being friends with so and so?" And she was like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, um, yeah." I was like, "Or what do you think I like?" I started distancing myself at this point because sometimes that would happen, like you know. Uh, yeah, I think it's a shame that I wish I had, especially now. I think in college I finally learned to embrace it because and even now too, well, especially now. I mean, it's still in college, but like, like I'm so glad that I can embrace it now. But I just wish that I was able to embrace it sooner because sometimes I feel like I'm a late bloomer because for my queer friends and like um, other like queer people who I met, they always like talked about like the experiences that they had in high school, and I'm like, that's so beautiful. Like I wish I had like had that but I didn't allow myself to have that. But I'm not sure if I could go back in time, if I could convince myself to embrace it either, because I was just so scared of like what people would think and how they would treat me and the names that they would call me and like what they would say behind my back, that I didn't let myself, like, you know. But I'm also wondering, even if I had like let myself, would I have had those same experiences? Because that doesn't take away the fact that I wasn't like brought up in an openly like queer, like, I don't know, environment. Like it was mostly like straight people who were around me at the time. So
But you
yeah.
were closeted in high school, right?
Mhm.
And then so you said you had these friends who would hold hands in high school,
Yeah.
and they got like people stared at them. Did anything else happen?
Oh yeah. Then one classmate like saw them like holding hands and like hugging, and they were like cuddling, being affectionate. And then she told her mom, and then her mom told the school, and then they were suspended from school and from like homecoming too. And that was pretty scary too, because then when that happened, that's when people really started to pick sides. Because then you had the people who were like, she had no business acting that way, or she had no business like doing that with, you know, in like, I don't know. But it's like the other times you would see like students like have their boyfriends over and hold hands with them, or like being affectionate with them, and no one would bat an eye. But then, you know, when that happened, I was like, so it's not even like an unspoken thing. It's a thing that like the school like kind of was like showing that they were against. Because what other reason could you come up with that, you know, would justify them getting suspended?
So there were straight couples who would show affection to each other in exactly the same way as this gay couple, and then it was the gay couple that got suspended.
Mm-hmm.
Did they say we're suspending you because you're gay, or they just said we're suspending you because you're openly affectionate, or maybe they didn't even justify it publicly?
Yeah, they didn't even justify it publicly. And if anyone, like, the teachers too, like, they knew what was going on, but they were like, and they would hear, like, students talking about it, but they were like, let's not talk about this during school hours. Like, let's not. Like, moving on. Like, you know, they would just not address it, or not even, like, an assembly or anything. No.
So you got the message that if you were out, there could be some like very specific negative consequences.
Yeah.
So when did you come out? Were you said what did you come out when you were in high school, or was it later?
It was sort of gradual. Like, I came out to, like, a couple friends, like, 3 friends. um, and then in college, it was like I removed the people would whose reaction I was always scared of, or like I had suspicions that they would be like, you know, like those friends who just were not supportive in college, and then that's when I was able to like finally start with like telling um like friends, like new friends. So like, hi Maria, nice to meet you, I'm gay. like you know, just like that's when I started. But but with family, like even my siblings, it was like also gradual, because I would just like drop subtle hints here and there, but then I didn't fully come out to them until I had until I got into a relationship. And I didn't want to like suddenly like be like, oh, I'm all of a sudden dating women. I just wanted to tell them like, hey, so I only like women, and that is how I identify. And they're like, oh, okay. You know, they've already been. At least they were like chill about it. But my parents was. I was very scared too because I was like, please don't tell my parents. Just like keep it a secret from them. But then, yeah, and then my family who's religious, I have not told them, but for the people who are here, I am out, except for my dad. But and then when I told my mom, um, I think she was waiting for me to change my mind. Like when I told her what my sexuality was, um, it was in such a I didn't even know like how to go about it. I mean, at first it was like at first I thought I could keep it from my parents because I thought like they have no business in knowing like who I date and who I am. But then I just started to feel a little bit lonely because then something like because I met someone and then I just remember like feeling like really happy and wishing that I could like tell my mom about it, but then feeling really sad because I was like, oh, but she doesn't know. But the way I told my mom was just like we were in the car and I don't remember like what we were talking about. I think we were laughing. I think she was laughing. She was in a good mood. I was like, so mom, what do you think about the gays? And she was like gay people? I was like, yeah, what do you think about them? And she's like, I think they're okay. I have no problems with them. But then she said, I think at one point we get confused. I was like, no, no, no. And then I tried to like educate her, be like, there is no confusion about that. And then she was like, well, I think it's a phase for some people. And I was like, I think it takes a lot of strength to be able to say like that you like someone, you know, and it takes a lot of like trauma within yourself, you know. And if someone like comes out that way, it's because they know it like for themselves too. And it's, you know, just saying that it's a phase, that's really validating. Because what if you said that you were straight and then someone said it's just a phase, you know? And she's like, okay, well, I think it's okay, but I just personally don't agree with that lifestyle. And I was like, it's not a lifestyle. It was just very, it was so like, that's another thing about coming out is that you have to, sometimes I feel like I have to educate people when, you know, and especially for my mom, it was like, okay, that's no problem because I want her to understand me. Um, so yeah, but then she was like, okay, well, no matter who you like, at the end of the day, I'll still love you. Um, you know, but just don't tell your dad because he might not be as understanding as I am. You know, he he was brought up as a man in Peru, and men in our countries have like very different views um, And she was like, and if he finds out, I don't want to say that he will, but he might ask you to move out. So, um, and then yeah, my mom was like, "You like women, but do you still like men?" And I was like I knew like that I didn't, but I was like, I don't know, maybe, yeah. Um, just to make it like more acceptable for her, because I was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, baby steps, like, you know. In her head, she still probably thinks that I'm like this boy crazy like girl who would always talk about like my crushes, when in reality they were just like distractions. Shut, you know, throw her off from who I actually was. Um, so yeah, and but then when I had my partner and I started dating um, this one person exclusively, and I told my mom about it, that's when she got really upset because I think she was still trying to. She thought that it was just that who I like, what my sexual orientation was more of a possibility instead of something that was like definitely true. Because when I told her, she was like, "And do you think that's okay?" And I was so like taken aback by that because from our previous experience, like from our previous conversation, it seemed like she would have been okay with it. But then I think that conversation kind of revealed like what she truly felt. Because then she was like, "Do you think that's okay? Like, I don't understand how this could have happened. Like, you weren't around any like queer people. Like, I didn't bring you up that way. Like, where did you get these ideas?" And then she was like, "Well, I don't know who told you this. I don't know where this came from." Um, and then that's when I started to like get really emotional. And then she was just like very mad. She was like, "Well, how did you expect me to react?" And I was like, "I just don't understand. Like, what's so wrong with me being with this person, you know?" And then she was like, "Well, do you think it's normal?" And I was like, "Of course it is." She was like, "If it's so normal, why didn't you tell your dad?" I was like, "Because you told me to keep it a secret and that it might result in me being kicked out of the house." And she was like, "Well, I just don't understand. He has his suspicions, but I've always like tried to protect you from them." Um, and then I was like, even more taken aback by that because I was like, maybe this could have been an opportunity for me to actually like, tell my dad, like, if he already suspected it, that could have started the conversation. But yeah, and then she was like, "Well, it's because you've had bad luck with guys." that's why. Or she's like, I know that you've been hurt in the past by guys, and that's why you're with a woman now. And then she started getting emotional. And she was like, I don't know where I went wrong. And I was like, then she was like, I don't know where I went wrong, or what I did, or what your dad did that made you think that, you liked women. And then I'm just like, I was like, okay, now I know. It's not me. This is about you. It's because you still think that this is something for you to control or something that you have a say over, you know. And there's no real issue with me. It's just you can't get a grasp around it. And if you can't get a grasp around it, then that's not on me. So, yeah, I mean, it was hard, but I think that's probably the worst reaction we could have expected from someone. I mean, I think that's the worst reaction I could have expected from someone, and that's what I was scared of. Um, that whole time when I was trying to when I was deep in the closet, or when I was trying to when I was scared and then I was hiding it from friends. That's the kind of reaction that I was most scared about. But then when I finally confronted her about it, and I finally told her, and I was able to say that no, but that's who I am no matter what. I think I gained some strength from that, and I was if I was able to stand up to someone who was very close to me and who dictated a lot of my life in the past, then I feel I can stand up to other people and tell them you know what, even if it's incomprehensible for you, no matter what, that's who I am, and I'm not going to put myself into a box or label myself as something that's more easy for you to process for your sake, So yeah.
So how did her reaction make you feel, and how does it feel to feel like you can't come out to your dad and other family members?
Well, I don't really have a relationship with my other family members, not because of my, not really solely because of my sexuality, but because of the way that they used to treat me when I was younger. So I guess for them, it's not really. Would I tell them now? I would tell them now if because I don't think I'm really after that whole interaction. I don't think I'm really as scared from. Yeah, I'm not scared by other people's reactions because now I'm okay, I can handle it. If I was able to handle that with my mom, which was intense, then I feel I can handle it now. But at the same time, I'm not really in communication with them, and I only see them I saw some songs almost 2 years ago. But with my dad, since I had that conversation with my mom, and because she emphasized how my dad wouldn't accept me, I was how can I interact with my dad without knowing that I'm hiding part of who I am? But also my relationship has gotten better with my dad, and I feel I could tell him now. At the same time, I can't afford the risk of possibly you know getting cut off financially right now at the moment. So but I feel like my dad has accepted me in other ways that kind of make me feel like more at ease, that if I do this, I feel like he could be accepting. Um, I think because I have thought about it too. I was actually like very close, like telling him a couple of days ago, um, because we had to sit down. And I was telling him how like I wanted to move out, and it was just like a very like heartfelt conversation. But then I was thinking, if my mom said that, then there's probably a reason why she would tell me that he would kick me out. So yeah.
Yeah, to have that threat hanging over your head, it seems difficult, right? Like that's just always in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Who knows? It might ultimately be unfair to your dad.
Yeah, maybe it's just like it could also be like I was also thinking, oh, maybe it's just like she doesn't really want me to be like as out. Like there's a part of her that's still in denial. Like if I did tell him, then that would like also like make it more real for her. But then I was also thinking about like all these experiences that my dad like is missing out on because I haven't told him. Like I went through like my first relationship and my first breakup, and he couldn't figure out why I was so sad. And I was like, I want to tell you, but like, you know,
Yeah, so like not being out creates this emotional distance
it definitely
between
does.
you and your parents, or your dad in this case, right? That like somebody, one of the people in your life that you love the most, and there's now this distance because you feel like it can't be out.
Yeah. Or like, sometimes I wish I could get like love advice from my mom, because I know that she'd be like really insightful before when I would like tell her about, I don't know, even like friends before. She would just be like, oh, you could do this. But it's said it was like sometimes being in a relationship, even now, can be kind of lonely if it wasn't for like also having like queer friends. Because it's like I just wish I could ask her like, hey, like, what do you think about this? Like, what should I handle this, or what would you think if this person, Because I know that while she's tolerable, like deep down, she's not like fully embracing it yet, or ready to embrace it. I mean, yeah, I think it just requires patience from both sides at this point. Um, because I know that she probably has a different background too. She definitely has a different background. So, yeah, it's definitely uncharted territories for her. But, I don't know. I guess, yeah. At least she stopped, like, asking me about boys, which is like, oh my god, so grateful. So grateful.
Did you ever actually try to date boys?
Date? No. How like in depth?
Okay, you don't have to. You can say whatever you want. I just was wondering if like this sort of talking about boys and pretending like you had crushes on boys and like being closeted and like maybe trying to be heterosexual. Like, do you have what? How do you feel about that part of your life? And do you have any like regrets?
Yeah. So many regrets. Um, yeah, because it was like, oh my gosh. Because I couldn't just talk about like boys to my friends. If I was like trying to convince people that I like them, I was like I have to really sell it. So I was like, And then also for myself too, because I couldn't accept myself. So I was like, okay, maybe I have had bad luck. Maybe I should just give it a shot. Maybe I'm just like, you know, maybe I'm just not sure what I want. Like, how can I know if I haven't tried it? So I like, I went on dates with guys, but it never like really went anywhere because I just didn't really feel that connection or like that, like, not even that connection. I just didn't really feel that interest as I did with girls. And yeah, I regret it because it also invited, it also caused me a lot of pain because while I wasn't interested in them, I feel like I was placing myself in situations that were like hurtful, you know? I don't know.
Like you were experiencing mistreatment.
Yeah. Um, but in high school, I was like willing to put up with it because I thought, oh, maybe this is just what I have to go through. Because maybe this is like better than like telling people who I actually am. So yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's more that could be said about on this topic, but the next section is on disability and ability.
Mm.
Is there anything else you wanted to say before we move on to that section?
Go ahead.
Okay, we could always also come back.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that you have ADHD and borderline personality disorder. So how did you come to understand that you had those, and how do they impact you?
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable talking? Okay,
Yeah.
making sure.
Was diagnosed with ADHD in 2021. At Davis. At first, I was like, wait, what's the question? Sorry.
So just like, how did you come to understand that you had ADHD and borderline personality disorder, and how did they sort of impact you on a daily or weekly basis?
Okay. Well, yeah, I was diagnosed with ADHD in 2021, but at first because I think at first I was like, the test results said one thing, but I was like, maybe I'm not, you know, like there's no way, like, you know, maybe this is just excuses for like my like restlessness, like hyperactivity, you know, not like really like being able to focus, but also, you know, I was like, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe it's not this. Like, what if I'm just making excuses for myself? But then the more I like started to like read about the symptoms, I was like, oh yeah, that's me. That's me. But yeah. And then yeah. And then borderline personality disorder, it's run in my mom's family for like such a long time. And I wasn't diagnosed with it until last year. But both of them make it really hard and like on a daily basis. I mean, for instance, borderline personality disorder has to do with like poor emotional regulation, um, like inconsistent like sense of self, that like huge fear of abandonment, um, but also like impulsiveness. Um, and those are all things that I struggle with.
I think we left off with you talking about big diagnosed as somebody with borderline personality disorder and ADHD and how they impact you.
Oh yeah, impact me in what way? Like interacting with others, or like
Well, I guess you can think about like how do they impact you? If there's anything you want to say about their general impact on you on a daily basis, just sort of as you live your life, but also educationally.
okay. Well, day to day basis, ADHD. I feel like I've always had to like. I feel like I always had to like deal with those symptoms. So I kind of like I'm good now with like a solid routine, at least study routine, where I know like how to how to deal with it, I guess. But something that's like more specific to me, more to like to my tendencies, like how you know, I don't know. Let me think. Wait, let me think. What I can say is that having BPD and ADHD, sometimes they're like they work together. Like that impulsiveness of BPD and ADHD, like the restlessness and like the brain fog and not being able to like, sometimes like I would be like multitasking, but I would try to do like 10 different things at a time. Or sometimes it was like, weirdly, it's like only being able to focus when I'm playing really loud music. But, um, but anyways, the two, ADHD and BPD, they really do like kind of get together and make it really hard for me to make like a decision in the moment or like focus on what to do when my brain is like scattered and I want to do so many things. And yeah, and also like acting on impulse, especially with like that like poor emotional regulation. It's become I have to like really force myself to like stay objective and not be driven by my feelings. Um, and sometimes it makes it hard when I have something to do, like a task that I really need to do, like I really need to get done. But because of that, because of BPD, it's like I'm more like hypersensitive to like what I'm feeling. And the way that one of my friends like described it to me is that like, oh, you seem to just have like really like when you have lows, they seem to be like really low, and your highs are really high. But it's not like it's not bipolar disorder because I know that there's like some like misconception from that, which is like where you have like a chemical imbalance and you're driven by like days of mania and then days of depression, whereas like BPD is more like something can happen to me and it's like all of a sudden I go from like sad to happy or like happy to sad, but it's like more intense. Um, but it does make it hard because it's like I want to focus on a task or I want to have like a good day at school where I can just be productive, but it's like my feelings just kind of take over like the space in my mind. Um, and then it just makes it really hard interacting with others too because another thing about being like that having that hypersensitivity is like I tend to misinterpret like things easily and it makes me more I noticed that it's like I felt like something will be like a personal attack more often because of how I would take things, and it's led to me having like unstable relationships, which is another, which also like plays in hand because it makes like in the past my lonely experiences even more isolating when I was already like going through unstable relationships. So yeah, but yeah, because of that hypersensitivity and stuff, it can make schoolwork just like and like my career goals like a little bit hard. Especially another thing is like with that like BPD where it's like unstable like sense of identity, it also plays into like unclear goals. And it's so frustrating even now because it's like I'm trying to get a grasp on is this something that I really want or am I just going on a whim of like a feeling here again? So, because I made like my indecisiveness too, like in the past, like if I wanted to study psychology, like I knew I wanted to study psychology, but it was like, you know, where do I study like psychology? Like where do I go? Like do I go back to Davis? Do I go to UC Irvine? Do I like stay here for another 2 years or do I try to get out as soon as possible and maybe like go to another 4 year university, possibly like maybe a private school if I can. Um, but it was like that constant instability that was like made things really hard to focus too and to like get things done because if I didn't know where I was going then how could I possibly like know what I needed to do and what classes I needed to take or like maybe I have to look into like applying for here, maybe I have to look into like this. um so it just like really made figuring things out for myself career wise really hard. And then yeah, also like I said, getting school stuff done. No matter like how much I told myself, okay, I know I have to do this. I need to do this. I'm gonna create a plan for this. If something happens, which completely like throws me off emotionally, it's like it almost feels like I'm drowning when something does happen. And it's like the only thing that I can focus on is the fact that I am drowning. Anything else. So yeah.
Is there kind of a particular guidance or are there accommodations that you think would be helpful um, at ARC or SEC?
Um Actually I wonder if like you know how we have clubs? I wonder if like a support group like for students would also benefit other students. Because I know like most importantly that feeling of like not like you're not alone also is really helpful and kind of empowering and gives you hope. But at least I had like understanding professors. Like when I would like tell them like, hey, like I'm going through this, like I need some extra time, and they were really nice. I know that there's also like counseling services for students, which I actually didn't know about until this year. But at that point, I already had like my own counseling outside of school, and also like emotional like regulating classes and stuff like that. Um, yeah.
You know, there's a queer Los Rios Discord. Have you heard of
No, but I had heard about like GSA, and then also like well, first of all, I'm part of the Sac City like Pride Club.
that? Oh, QSA.
Like I'm like yeah, I talk to the president like we're friends, so we always like yeah talk about yeah.
Is there a lot of neurodivergent people who tend to be queer as well, who are involved in these clubs, and so
Oh yeah.
I wonder if you find community that way. I know I mentioned the Discord because there was a whole channel for people who are neurodivergent
Oh.
in the queer Discord.
Yeah. Should look into that. But actually, the president, like, they're queer, and they're also like neurodivergent. And then
I interviewed them.
yeah, Lene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty cool.
They were in my queer studies class.
Wait, you teach year 2?
No, Lene took the class at ARC.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say. Oh. Yeah, it was actually like pretty interesting because like they would always like swipe up on my like on Instagram. You'd always I was in Barcelona. They always be like, hey, like what have your experiences been there, and like what's the queer dating scene like and stuff like that. And you're also like getting into it, but and then it's also like polyamory is also like something that's really like also questioning, but I'm not gonna get into that because that's another thing.
So do you feel empowered as somebody who's neurodivergent? And that do you sort of take it on as an identity that makes you feel empowered?
I'm definitely getting there. Both ADHD and BPD, they're not curable, but they're treatable. But I think there is still also very negative things around it. More so with BPD, because there's this like negative stereotype of like BPD people that they're like manipulative, and like crazy, hysterical. So, and then also like even just like being neurodivergent and also like or having like a mental illness, it's like or a personality disorder. People tend to not like know how to react to that because I think they don't know much about it. So then they're like, oh, what does that mean? And what does that mean for me? Like, am I going to like get hurt by you in this? But I think it's still yeah, because I think ADHD is more so something that like I don't know how to explain this. There's a very like blurred line that I'm still like trying to like grapple. That's like, am I with BPD at least, where it's like I don't want to hate myself for this. I also don't want to completely embrace it. I just want to be aware of it and be aware of the fact that I can change it. Because BPD is still a disorder that has like some negative tendencies for like yeah manipulativeness, controllingness, impulsivity, dangerous like behavior. So and
do you think those are stereotypes? Or
I think a stereotype would be more so like all people who have BPD are like this. Whereas I know that these are traits that like I've had personally. Like where I've had like a tendency to do one of those things or to be one of those things because of having BPD. So I guess it's like I'm still trying to like work through it because like I can say I have BPD, but at the same time it's like that does not mean that I'm okay with some of the like the negative side of the symptoms that I do have. Like I have BPD and I'm a person with BPD who is still like trying to you know, work through having it and like trying to like lead a healthy life, you know, with like having like healthy interactions and healthy relationships, and interacting with people in like a good stable way. But wait 1 second. I was gonna say something. What I will say though is that I feel like empowered when someone tries to tell me like, oh, like you have BPD, like, and then they throw around the word like crazy or hysterical, and I'm like, that's what you don't say. Like you're not going to invalidate like my how I like how I feel and justify how you're going to treat me because I have BPD. You're not going to treat me like I am, you know, like I don't deserve to be taken seriously because I have BPD, or like, you know, I have no idea what I'm talking about because I have BPD. That's when I like that's when I do feel like the courage to say like to speak up about it. But because you know,
So do you feel like you can tell your faculty members? I mean, when you ask for accommodations, do do you tell them any specifics, or do you sort of avoid telling them any specifics about like having BPD or ADHD and as the reason for your accommodation? Because if you're, I mean, like, do you have any concerns about how they would react if you were specific, or do you feel like it's more like it's none of your business anyway?
honestly, sometimes I'm like, what if they think that it's like sometimes I'm like, isn't it what this is? Because sometimes I'm like worried. Oh, are they going to think that I'm coming up with excuses? Or are they like, you know, deep down they're gonna think like, oh, I'm actually lazy and is it just an excuse? So then yeah. I mean, at least my psychology professors, they've been really understanding because, you know, it's psychology. Like they know about it. But I think I think most of my community professors have actually been really understanding because at some point, you know, they also come from different backgrounds too. And they some of them also have like their own experiences with I know that some of them even just like mental health, if they don't have like a disorder or, you know, an illness of any kind, even with mental health, they understand how like and just being depressed can make things really hard and difficult. So
Oh, you know, there is a club called NAMI.
wait, I think of have I heard of it?
It's a national organization, and I'm pretty sure there's a club,
Oh,
and I think it's active, or was active. I think it's
I
still
know
active.
what you're talking about, but I didn't know they had a club like within the Cerritos,
Yeah.
like because it's like its own organization like outside. But
Yeah.
I didn't know.
But I'm pretty sure it's at ARC too, or at least it was. If it's not still
Hmm. I was gonna say because I was looking at like active clubs. I don't remember like seeing it.
there. Okay, well maybe I don't know. You know, students come in, they go, so
True.
sometimes their club kind of falls to the wayside, and then it gets revived, and so I have to check.
Yeah.
So I have a question that's trying to get at the intersection of queerness and neurodivergence. How do you think the two intersect for you in your experiences? How does being neurodivergent shape your experience as queer, and vice versa? If you're able to speak to that question, very broad.
I'm not sure how to answer it, but well, what I can say is that I've had people like question my like sexual orientation because of having BPD, because of that like unstable like sense of self, and it goes back to like invalidating. It's like finding like more reasons to invalidate like how I identify. Um, but yeah, I mean, one affecting the other, and it's affecting BPD.
I mean, I can imagine feeling like you have to be closeted, the way that some of your family has reacted to you being lesbian, feeling that sense of shame and really worrying about how people are going to kind of react to you coming out. I wonder if that sort of, can, like, if you can relate those experiences about how you felt to having, like, in the context of having BPD. Like, if having BPD kind of can make all of those experiences feel sort of like bigger, more difficult.
Ooh, you know what? Yeah, because like one of the main things about like I said, one of the main things about like BPD is also like that huge fear of abandonment, which makes it even worse. Like wanting to hide myself because I'm scared of like losing the people who I had in my life, and like also like if they're going to harm me. So when those two things were combined, it just increased like that fear and the feelings of shame too. And yeah, yeah, no, it's just I think that fear of abandonment was something that like really drove me to be in the closet too. Fear that like I guess people like wouldn't accept me, especially people who were like closest to me, and just feared that I'd be disappointed. And um, yeah,
It's also kind of a parallel of like hiding pieces of yourself, right? Like not always being open with having BPD because you're maybe afraid of how people are going to react to you, and then not being out always anyway as lesbian, and as questioning your gender because there's that kind of that parallel experience.
yeah, no, it was like being scared of how people would react to like my different like identities. And it's like, okay, this is acceptable to this person, but then I know that this is not acceptable to them. So then it's like, it was like my identity was kind of like fragmented. Like, only certain pieces were worth showing, but not the whole. Because otherwise, like, they would be, I guess, I don't know. Otherwise, there would be an issue of some kind to that person. Like, kind of picking and choosing what it was okay to show to make me acceptable for this person. But always having that fear that deep down I was not going to be accepted as a whole for my different like identities.
So is it okay if we move on? Or is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
No, we can move on.
Okay. So we have a lot of questions here, so I'm just trying to figure out where to go next. But I guess so. Like being Latina and multiracial, how has that kind of shaped your educational experiences, both in high school and in college? Like, have you I mean, do you feel like you can respond to that very broad question?
Like my experiences in high school
Yeah, high school
and
and college, yeah. Like,
I can say that in high school, I felt like I stuck out even more. Like high school, my high school was predominantly white, so it was like me trying to fit in, but I was also like, no matter how much I tried to fit in, there was still going to be some stereotype about me. Um, like, yeah, people assuming what my parents did for work, assuming where I was born, or assuming like how I dressed, and sometimes like um people talking to me in like a fake accent and calling me like like one example that I can come up with is that I once had a former friend, no friends anymore, but she would call me like it's just so crazy, like it's just so crazy. Sorry, like she'd be like, oh my gosh, Maria, my exotic brown princess, and I was like, that's a little weird. Or like my Amazonian brown queen. I'm like yeah. I was like, I don't like yeah, just things like that. Or like yeah, no matter what I did or how like Americanized I was. Because sometimes people would call me like, you're too whitewashed. But then it was like, aren't you like this? Aren't you like, don't you do this, 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 and this? But I thought you people would always like, it was like comments like that from people. But it will always like kind of sneak its way in there in like the most like mundane conversation. But at least in college, like that's where I found like some diversity, and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, because it's not just about like being with like only with other like Latino people. It's just like about being with people who are not necessarily like Latino or who are not necessarily like white, but just like all kinds of like different like races and ethnicities. That really makes me feel like at ease. Because also it's like otherwise I'm like trying. I feel like I'm still like trying to fit into like one or the other.
okay, so can you talk some about your experiences taking courses that either wholly or in part focus on queer and trans topics? Either in high school, which I'm not sure you have those experiences in high school, but high school or college?
Mm-hmm. High school, definitely not. Like, I mean, if we did talk about like topics, um, it would just be like in theology class, they'd be like, and this is a sin, and moving on. Like, just briefly, like, that's what all we're gonna say about it. Like, you know, the right way, or like what God intended was men and women, like, to be in a relationship with each other, you know? And then just, and they're like, and then they're like, okay, moving on. Like, they just weren't going to go out and say like, oh, this is wrong. Like homosexuality is wrong. It was like tiptoe around it, but basically like saying it, never like directly in your face, because otherwise, if it was like so clear what they were saying, then they knew that they were going to like be met with some like lashback from some students, but I would say in college, the first course that I took that really like dove into it was American Women's History. It was like really interesting because I was like, okay, where was this in like the history textbooks that I had learned, that I used in high school? Um, because I think that even like in public schools where it's like not really like as like heavily regulated as I would say like private schools. I mean, they'll have to follow like a certain curriculum, but even then, I know like some teachers can be more partial to some topics. But I think like some people who even went to like public schools still like were surprised to learn some of those things as well. Like I made friends in those classes, and they were like, "Oh, I didn't know that. It's really cool." Like, you know. But psychology, my psychology courses, they did kind of partially talk about it. Um, I think it also depends on like the teacher who's teaching it because um, some of them don't really, while they have to teach it and it's part of like the textbook, some of them it seems like they don't have like a clear understanding themselves. But at least it has talked about like a couple of the like a few of the different like sexual orientations, um, like slightly. Um, but yeah, to be fair, I also am not deep into my psychology. Like I've mostly fulfilled like my um, general education requirements, but in psychology, I've only taken like two courses. I'd say, yeah.
So, what has it meant to you when you have taken classes that have included queer and trans topics? Has that felt meaningful to you? Why do you think that's important?
Well, yes, yeah, because like it's I know it's relevant to me, but then it's also like the world kind of also acknowledging that it's also relevant, especially seeing it in like a classroom setting. It's like when they tell you like this is what you need to know, and then when they don't include it, it's like so you're telling me it's like it's kind of like not worth knowing or learning about. Because I definitely feel like it is something that is worth learning about. I feel like they're like the misconceptions that people have about like queer people, trans people. It's like I feel like it comes from like a lack of knowledge and fully like being exposed to it, which is okay if you're not exposed to it. But then I feel like you can always try to overcome that in like the classroom setting and not just like learning it yourself. But I feel like the classroom like gives that opportunity to people to learn more about it. And yeah, I feel like it's not just something that's worth learning for people who identify that way, but also like for cisgender, hetero, heterosexual people to learn as well.
Um, so, if you could, would you take additional courses that focus on queer and trans topics? And if you would, what would you like those courses to focus on in particular?
Oh yeah. Well, I wish I had taken like what was that class called? The other one that you were offering?
Oh, Intro to LGBTQ Studies.
Yeah, I wish I had taken that class. At the time, I was like, I was going to transfer to another school, or I was thinking about transferring to another school, which was a religious school. So I was like, yeah, I was like, but also I was like, okay, this is my plan B, in case like you know, and I was like, in case I feel like I really have to like get out of community, what are they, and this is my way out, so what are they gonna think, like, if it's gonna impact me on some way. But I feel like now I wish I could take it. Like I wish I maybe I will. But also I want to take human sexuality, which is like a psychology course. Um, what I have heard though is that it really depends on like who teaches it. Because one of my friends took that class, but she had a teacher who she felt was not really knowledgeable about those things, or like didn't really empathize with what she was teaching. So yeah, I think I would really want to like learn like the psychology of it, or like because yeah, I don't know. I mean, psychology is an interest of mine, and I want to like learn more about myself and like my identity. Then I feel like those two like intersecting would be really interesting for me.
Um, so what had faculty done in the classroom to make you feel included or excluded in your identity? Sort of your identities broadly speaking. So not just your queerness, but also
Pronouns.
your other identities.
Um,
Can you repeat that?
Pronouns. Yeah. um,
Why do you say that?
because I feel like it always like not always, but like a good majority of the time, like they them. Although it's like faculty, and it's people who are like who have knowledge in like their area and stuff like that. I think that doesn't stop them from like being people, and like people are still like unsure about things that they're not like that they don't really have much like experience with or personal like attachment to. So they them is still like a pronoun that I guess is like new to some people still. So yeah, um, yeah, yeah. That's when I guess I will choose to play it safe and just go buy like sheep or because it's just sometimes it's just like at least in a classroom setting where I feel like I'm okay, I'm here to learn and I want to like make the least amount of like trouble for people ever. Or like not what am I trying to say? The least amount of like I'm not trying to get personal or draw attention to myself in the setting sometimes. So that's when I'm like, I don't know. It might change though. I feel like it's been changing recently. I'm like, okay, it's she they. Like those are my pronouns. But oh, you know what? I did have like I did have like an experience with like one professor who was like I don't know what we were talking about. But yeah, sometimes they'll like assume like the gender of your partner. And like I'm like, should I correct them? I'm like, I feel like it's none of their business, but they're already like bringing up like the possibility of a partner anyways. So I'm like, yeah. So yes. Sorry, could you elaborate? Like questions.
So have you had an experience in the classroom of faculty asking for pronouns, and how many times has that happened? Or sharing their own pronouns?
Oh, I always like it when like faculty like shares like their own like pronouns because it's like, well, that's nice. Like you're including yourself in this too. Like you're aware that it's not just like things like something for the students, but it's like for you as well. Even if, you know, I don't know, like regardless of like what you're teaching, even if it's like not a humanities course, I think it's like it's it's just always nice to hear like faculty share like what their pronouns are. And yeah, knowing that they're not excluded from this. Because I know like a lot of people are like some people are like, I don't believe in pronouns. You know? Or they just like feel like there's no need for pronouns. For me. And it's like, it's not the case. But yeah, I haven't had like people like directly ask me like what my or like faculty directly ask me like what my pronouns were, but just like it more starts like in the icebreaker where it's like, okay, share your pronouns with the class and stuff like that. And then it's like, yeah.
Has that happened in one or two or more classes where faculty have asked students to share pronouns?
Yeah, it's I would say in like 80% of my classes.
Oh wow.
Um but then also it's like I'm also counting like not just in person, but also like on discussion, like board posts. Like introduce yourself, your name, and your like pronouns.
Um, is there anything else you want to say about that? Like, what have faculty done to make you feel included or excluded in your identities in the classroom?
Well, I did have this one experience with like a professor who like really like it's really interesting. Did have a couple of them like yeah, assume like who I was with and then being like, oh, you're with a woman or like one making jokes and like um I guess like one of them like making jokes like, oh, boys and girls, like, just like emphasizing that like hetero like activity and stuff like that. Just like, I don't know. But it was like not just a one time thing, it was like little snide like jokes like that.
Was it one professor in particular or multiple classes?
No, it was like one professor. Well, these were two different professors, but they were in my chemistry and biology like classes when I first like transferred from Davis. But not only did it just feel like a little bit uncomfortable, but it just like it was also like okay, I don't know. I was like slightly like I don't know. Like that was like the default setting that he just like I don't know. Yeah.
Like assumed heterosexuality.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I can ask a question about representation. So have you seen faculty, staff, administrators who, like, how important do you think this question of representation is, right? To see people in staff positions, people who are faculty who share one or more of your identities.
Very important because I think I would have benefited from that like at a young age. If, like or even in high school, even in like early on in college, just knowing like and seeing like queer, trans, or Latina, like or even like people of color, or just all of the above, like thriving and like in a university setting and like teaching like a class. I think that representation even just early on would have given me like a lot of hope and like courage to just be out and like accepting of myself, and also like I feel like other students too, they'd kind of would have respected it a little bit more too, like my, you know, because they have like this like person of authority who identifies in those ways, then and they respect that person. Why wouldn't they respect like other students who also identify that way? Because it's like setting an example, you know. So yeah, I would say it's very important.
Have you had faculty at ARC or SCC who are queer and Latine or queer faculty of color?
I would say I would say I've had um they're either one or the other. Like they're not like that I've known. They're not like Latino and queer, but they're I've usually had like white queer professors. So yeah. But yeah.
Faculty is also overwhelmingly white. In
Yeah.
general. Have you noticed that?
I was gonna say I was like actually now that I think about it. Yeah.
So would it feel important to you to have sort of a faculty member who was a queer person of color or queer and Latine?
Yeah, it would feel important to me. Even just like seeing like yeah, having like both. Cause yeah, actually that would feel more like I because I previously said how I feel like I'm like kind of like fragmented, and I feel like I can't like put both of those things together sometimes. But then like having like because sometimes like professors are role models, so even just having like that person who is like all of those things, you know, and like presents themselves as like a whole, like I think that's just very it does matter to like to me, and I think it would also matter to like other students. Um, you know, because I think they could see like the possibility of like who they could become like in the future, like within that professor, and also like give them hope. You know, if maybe they don't have like that chance to like fully like be themselves in like other areas of their life.
So I'm stepping back a little bit, but I realize I didn't ask this question. So, um, why do you think it's important for people to use the correct pronouns when they refer to you and other queer students? And then I guess a follow-up question, how do you think faculty in particular can learn to use the correct pronouns for people, for their students?
I'm sorry, I blanked out.
That's
I'm
a lot.
sorry.
Well, the first question is why do you think it's important for people to learn to use the correct pronouns?
Because I feel like that's me, and I personally already went through so much struggle within myself to find like how to describe myself that I feel like it just out of respect, I guess. Like I think like it's a sign of respect to people to use the correct like pronouns, and also just like acknowledge, you know, because like yeah, I use like she, they. That like I guess I mostly use she, but that does not mean to say that like I don't identify as like they, them. You know, that's still there. Which I feel like people tend to like overlook it. So yeah.
Yeah, when you go by if you are more feminine presenting often and you use she, they, then people will just start to use she because they're like, oh, that's my comfort zone. That's what I know.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they're like, well, she looks like a she. Like, it's like, yeah. And it goes back to that thing where it's like, okay, well, I have to dress a certain way or have to look a certain way in order for people to start calling me and treating me the way, like, or not even treating me, because you should be particularly, like, I don't know, treating me as not a person, but, but yeah, for people to use, like, how do I say, to acknowledge, like, my identities. But, yeah.
So, how do you think faculty can learn to use the correct pronouns?
That's a really good question. Um, well, it's really helpful that they still like ask like, hey, what pronouns you use and introduce yourself, like, like include your pronouns. Mm. I mean, I feel like it doesn't hurt to ask, like which pronouns do you prefer? Like it's okay if like they forgot because I feel like it's already like pretty hard like keeping track of so many students, and if they're like unsure, they can always like ask. But yeah,
Okay to forget, but try to remember, maybe.
yeah. Try to remember or like at least like yeah, like if I feel like it's okay if it like maybe it's new for you or it's uncomfortable, but like like try to like incorporate it more, acknowledge it, like please, like yeah,
Maybe like try to learn the importance of respecting pronouns, and then if you know the importance of respecting pronouns, maybe you'll put more effort into.
yeah. Actually, I feel like some people don't really understand like what pronouns are, or where they come from, or what do they mean, like what does it mean in terms of like gender identity, gender expression, like how do they go together, how do they differ, and it's like yeah, I feel like even just learning that, I think it also like help them feel more comfortable with like using the correct pronouns too. Because yeah, because yeah, yeah, because I think if sometimes it doesn't come natural to them because yeah, they don't sometimes like really fully understand it or understand like yeah the importance of it.
So, have you been in classes that feel inclusive of the Latina experience?
I feel like that's an answer. Other I'm trying to think of like other than like American Women's History.
The difficulty is telling. I think we are a Hispanic, at least ARC, probably SAC too, but Hispanic serving institution.
Yeah, I'm like trying to think included in the curriculum or like the professors.
Curriculum. Yeah. Like, have like, has Latina history come up? Has topics come up? And I don't know. Like, if you're talking about, I don't know if you're talking a psychology class about racialized experiences, like, has, or like experiences around ethnicity and culture, has like the Latina experience come up at all? I mean, there's probably a range of ways it could have come up in lots of different kinds of classes.
Psychology. I feel like the classes that I've had were more focused on like the Black community, and then but we have had like a communications class where we talked about like oh, and sociology too. Where we talked about how like our like different Latino communities and also like cultures have like their own way of communicating and also like traditions and stuff like that. So yeah, we can talk about that.
Do you feel like you've been like? Do you think there's room for improvement?
Yeah, I think there always is room for improvement. Yeah. Um, yeah. I don't know how though. Like I'm trying to think of like what are some. Could you ask another follow-up question?
Well, I think it's hard because exclusion feels so systematic, and you're just so used to the exclusion. Then you have to imagine how the inclusion happens, right?
Yeah, because
And that becomes difficult.
yeah, it's kind of like I've just gotten so like comfortable with being excluded. It's just not good. um, but
I can think in like an English class, literature.
yeah, like yeah, actually, I was like wondering like, did I read any like, books or poems by or like any mentions of like Hispanic or Latino authors? And I was like, I don't think so. Now that I think about it, um, honestly though, that yeah, could definitely start with like literature. Maybe, and then later, for instance, in my psychology classes, my professors use a lot of like examples, but I feel like it would also like help including like the I don't know, like the demographic too, maybe. Not so sure. But
Okay, just have a final couple of questions. What do you think the college can do to make queer and trans students feel more included?
I feel like more events that are for queer and trans students. Yeah. Just like encouraging like that sense of community and also yeah, I would say that representation that definitely does matter. Um I feel like just starting with those would really help. Yeah.
Um, and do you think there's anything the college can do in particular for queer and trans students of color?
Hmm. I was gonna say like I'm not sure if this is relevant, but even like in curriculum, like including like where it's appropriate, like including like intersectionality and how those two like have to do with each other, and also like how they can impact like a person, like being one or the other or even both. Um, wait, yeah, yeah, and yeah, I would say that, and then colleges. Sorry, can you ask a further?
I'm going to ask a follow-up question.
Yeah.
Wait, what was the question? Oh, what can the college do to better serve queer and trans students of color in particular? So a follow-up question to that?
Mm-hmm.
Like you could think about, well, you talked about representation already.
Mm-hmm.
Said a little bit about the curriculum. Um, like campus life. Is there anything in particular?
I know we have like College Pride Month in May. There's not really like a lot about that. Like, I think, I think it'd be nice if they had like, yeah, like college events or campus like events, opportunities for, particularly for like queer trans students to like mingle, get out, like see that there's like other people who also like identify that way, and it's not just them. Because like yeah, I feel like colleges or even like communities where you get like a lot of your interaction done, um, honest from what I've seen too, not just from like my experiences, but also like with my friends, because a lot of them like they work a lot, so they don't really have time to really interact with all kinds of like people except for college, so that's their only like way of interacting or like their only chance of like a social life. So yeah, but yeah, and also just like probably professors could also talk about more about like the events that are going on. That, for instance, like Pride Center events, like you know, at ARC, I feel like that would also be pretty nice to inform like students that they have that, because I feel like some students, when you tell them like, oh, this is going on, they're like, oh, really? Like, oh, I didn't know. For how long? Like, since when has that? Like, yeah, you know. But
Okay, so anything you'd like to add or questions you'd like to return to?
I don't even remember like what the questions were. I'm trying to think.
Oh, we've gone through a lot of them.
We did, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a blur.
I think that's. I feel like I can't really think of anything.
That's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think there's obviously more questions I could ask, but I think we've gone on for a while. So thank you for your time.